Hash Hush and Circle Up.
Welcome to On, the Hash House Harrier podcast for interviews, history, and stories. I'm your host, Ra.
Today, we are not with someone who's only rescuing organs, but we are with a longtime hasher who is started one of the Continental Hashers, a very small club. If you met him, you probably remember when it happened. I remember meeting this guy in 1996, the eve of Cyprus Interhash, and he had to jet away. I invited him to be on stage with me, and he couldn't do it. He had to leave. I don't know if he remembers that story, but today, welcome on the podcast, Sister Michael.
Hey, how you doing, Ross? Sister Michael here. Good to be with
great.
you. And I do remember when we met, and I had to jet off because I had something to do with Marty Henratty, with Garfield.
Yeah.
We were bunking together in Cyprus, and we had plans.
Yeah, I ran around with you. I think it was Thursday night. We ran around all over Cyprus together, and I got to know you a little bit. I was taken with you, and I wanted you to come on stage with me, and you said, I won't be here. So anyhow, I'm glad I met you. I'm glad you dropped in. Let's tell everybody your origin story of hashing. How, when, and where did you get to your first hash?
My first hash was in 1985 in Lusaka, Zambia. But I only went on one. I wasn't really at a place in my life. I was working too hard. I didn't have much spare time. I did a lot of amateur theatre in Zambia. But somebody invited me along to the hash, and I went to the hash, and I thought, oh, this is fun. I have to try it again. But I didn't get to try it again until 1991 in Oslo, when I was invited to the hash by the Wolf, Wolfgang Gust auf Deutschland. No longer with us, sadly. He was the Grand Master of Oslo hash. He invited me along, and a few months later, I got a hash name, which was his doing. So Oslo, I consider to be home hash, original hash.
How did you meet the Wolf before you went to that hash?
I had a lot of friends who were hashing, although I wasn't hashing, and I went along to an on just for the drinks, thinking I can just handle the drinks. So I got to do the on or the on after, as it were, without doing the run. And he told me I should come along and invited me, and I went.
What was it like with Oslo then, 1991, and how did you feel about the traditions, and were they singing and all that kind of stuff? Because that's right in your wheelhouse, drinking, singing, all that stuff. Yeah,
they did a lot of drinking. They had great circles. They had a guy who was the RA there at the time called the Vicar. I don't know if you know the Vicar and Flying Chicken.
He's still around. He's still around.
Yeah. He's still in Oslo. I see them regularly. I go back to Norway for my sins. I've got 4 children and 4 grandchildren there. I go back a couple of times a year, and I pop in and see everybody. Yeah, they're doing really well. I think he and Hannah just retired, so good for them. But this was a long while ago. Everybody was relatively new. The hash had been started just a couple of years earlier by the European Union ambassador to Norway. His name was, what do we call him? His Excellency. Yes, that was his hash name. Nye Hughes. He's also sadly no longer with us. That would be 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I was really active for 30 years until I retired. Age does slow us down a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, so you were moving around Africa and picked up your second continent there in Europe. How often were you changing residence places then?
I first went to Africa, to Zambia, with the Norwegian government. My first wife was Norwegian, and I learned to speak the language and down to Africa. That was an interesting time. Apartheid in South Africa was still going strong, and I went down there to set up a printing unit. I thought an educational printing unit for an organization called the ANC. And I really didn't know much about it, but I ended up being the only white man in the African National Congress's headquarters in Zambia. And I should have been there for 6 months, ended up there for 7 years, and had a wonderful time. And then went back to Norway, got divorced, got sent out to Ethiopia, where I met my current wife, who was working at the US Embassy. Married her, became an American, then joined the State Department in my own right. And then we went to Israel for 2 years. We hashed with the Holy Land hash, helped a German guy there, also called the Wolf, an Australian gentleman, to get the Holy Land hash up and running. And I was RA Songmeister there for a couple of years.
let's stop on the journey and catch
Oh,
some
Israel, yes,
details
because
of
that's
some of these places. Because first, we're going to have to go to Ethiopia and what happened there that led to PanAfrica. Let's talk about PanAfrica. What was hashing like in Ethiopia? So one time you were the only white man in the ANC, Lusaka,
down in
Zambia.
Zambia, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
then
what was it like in Ethiopia then? And
there was
hashing.
quite a few expats. There were very few expats that actually lived there. There was the odd one who'd married a local and decided to live there, but there was no real expat community other than the aid programs, Red Cross, USAID. Oh, fingers crossed for them. And it was just wonderful. People were so friendly. I love the Ethiopians. I wanted to go to the Interhash in Cyprus. So 96, there were several people on the Ethiopian Addis Ababa hash who wanted to go to Cyprus, but they couldn't get visas. It was Garfield and I sat around and said, you know what we could do? We discussed this actually at Cyprus. We said, you know what we should do? We should have an African Interhash. Just call it an African Interhash and just try and create a bit of a buzz around it, but mostly for the Ethiopians, so they could experience an international event with some visitors and so on. And we never thought it was going to take off, but we had quite a few people came from outside. And before the end of the weekend, we had, I think it was Dar es Salaam, took on the mantle of putting it on 2 years later. And as far as I know, it's been on every 2 years, every other year since then. So that was also in 96. So now we're going back 28 years, almost 30 years. So there must have been 15 of them.
There's been some spectacular ones. Did you make it to Vic Falls?
No, I didn't. And that's one of my biggest regrets. When I was working, I didn't always have control over my free time, but I would love to have gone there. I was going to go there with Garfield, but
he barely made it too. He was having health issues there and had surgery, but he made it to the weekend, but he really wasn't so active. And he wasn't kind of the ringleader there. I went on a prelude with Dairy Board in Harare on the way. We stopped then, and then Vic Falls. It's just one of those things that PanAfrica has in its history. Is an incredible first time a hotel opening, taking over the whole hotel, and it grew. That one was like 400 people. So it's a continental event. Surviving the changing world is pretty impressive. That coming up on 30 years.
Yeah. I tell people Africa's a continent. People refer to it, talk about it like it's a country. It's not. There's some wonderful places in Africa, and there's some shitholes. The same as in the US, same as in Europe. Some wonderful places, and there's places I wouldn't go out after dark. Even in New York, Washington. I love Africa. I spent almost 25 years in total in Africa. But that was how the PanAfrica hash started. We thought it would be a one-off to cause a buzz and do something nice for the Ethiopian hashes. Because at that time, they would get 100 every Saturday. They get 100. And most of these were young kids who wanted to go out running and having fun, didn't have vehicles. Some of them didn't have shoes, but they'd all meet up at the Hilton Hotel, downtown Addis. Then those who had vehicles, and everyone would run and jump in the vehicles. And sometimes there'd be like 20 people crammed in the back of a pickup truck, which was legal down there. And we'd all go off and have a wonderful time. And pretty much every Saturday on the way back from the runs, because they were always outside of town, we'd stop off at a local bar, and we would have arranged earlier to get a goat roasted. So we'd have roast goat, and it was just cheap as cheese. You could do that regularly, and the expats would buy a goat and let the people chow down. It was good times. It was good times. And they're still going strong. They've got over 2,000 runs now.
Yeah. That decade of the 90s when you really got into hashing was a heyday of so many national capitals and development city headquarters with these diverse populations of people rotating in and out in 3 years. And then you went to Israel, which had at that point the capital in Tel Aviv.
No, the capital was always Jerusalem.
But I'm sorry. The embassies were there. You had the Western Embassy crews were around Tel Aviv.
It was all the expat community, whereas you had the Israeli government was in Jerusalem. Quick sidebar. It was interesting that I married my wife in Ethiopia. She was the ambassador's PA, so I got well looked after. I moved in with her on the compound, which is a very nice swimming pools, tennis courts. We ended up leaving there, and I had my immigration package, and we landed in the US for the first time. I did on a Sunday night, handed in my package and got something called a green card. I don't know if it was a green card or just the paperwork for it. Then Monday was a national holiday. I think it was President's Day. Tuesday morning, the State Department had arranged my interview with the INS. And Tuesday afternoon, I was sworn in as a citizen, less than 48 hours after I first went to the US. Which sounds crazy. It's called expeditious naturalization because the government wants all family members to be American citizens so that they fall under American laws and rules and SOFA agreements and so on. So then when I went to Israel, I was already a citizen. And there, Maria was the PA for the security chief. And he asked if I had a job. And no, he said, okay. He immediately gave me a job with an interim security clearance as a bodyguard driver for driving the ambassador and others around down into Gaza. Spent a lot of time down in Gaza, all these places that are being blown up and you're hearing about now on the news. I've been there, worked there. The Palestinians were wonderful as well. It just breaks my heart, some of the stuff that's happening in the world. But Israel was very special.
Well, let's talk about hashing in Israel and life in Tel Aviv. Pretty cosmopolitan place then, for sure. And
it was. It wasn't so much that it was cosmopolitan, but it was, I'm going mad. What's the word for non-religious? It was very secular. It was very secular. You had just down the road from a synagogue, you had a McDonald's doing egg and bacon cheeseburgers. So it really was an interesting place. And we got to travel a lot from there. We went to the 1000th run of the Hashemite Hash House Harriers in Jordan. That was a wonderful, that was a crazy week. We got permission to run en masse down through the souk at Petra. We were singing on songs in the treasury there. The acoustics were phenomenal. The public's not allowed in there anymore. I don't think that was because of us, but they're looking after the building a bit better now. And we had wonderful time there. And of course, I came down to Cairo a couple of times for various things you had going on.
Yeah. One thing that happened with the Tel Aviv hash, I don't know if it was one time we came over to hash over there, but there were a handful of people that I talked to on the hash who didn't know that the Hash House Harriers was something beyond Tel Aviv. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, the hash was very small. When we first went there, we were looking around and they were just doing one run a month. And there was a guy called the Wolf who worked at the Australian embassy. He was an interesting character. He was their consul. He wanted to make it more often, but there weren't enough people to do it. So I started a little database, started adding in everybody from all the other embassies. And there was a telecom company there, forget the name of it. And there was like half a dozen young guys there working as engineers for this telecom company. And they all came on block. They thought all this drinking, hey, yeah, let's go. And it was just fabulous. We had weekends away. We went up to the Sea of Galilee a few times. We went up the Horns of Hatteras, which is where there was a big battle between Al-Saladin and the Knights Templar hundreds of years ago. There was a wonderful thing there. It wasn't only hash, and they called it the Four Seas Swim. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
They would go out and they would swim in 4 different seas, 5 o'clock in the morning, all in a bus, off down to the coast in the Mediterranean. And then from the Mediterranean, they went up to the Sea of Galilee and went swimming there. And of course, drinking beer on the bus all the way. Then down to the Sea of the Salt Lake. What's that one called? The Sea of
Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea. Then from the Dead Sea, and then all the way down to the Red Sea, to Aqaba, where that was the final one. So that was a hell of a day's driving and drinking. But it was called the Four Seas Swim, and they did the Med, the Bread, the Dead, and the Red, all in one day. And that
I thought somebody called it had a Fred in there some lines at some point. The Med, the Dead, the Fred, and the I don't remember. I went over for a triathlon in Eilat once, and we were talking about that. We had just missed the event. Yeah, it's spectacular.
It was fabulous.
Were you there just after they almost brokered the international organization almost brokered a written
Oh, the Oslo
treaty?
Accords.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little bit involved in that in the early days. There was a guy called Teddy Larsen who was a Norwegian politician, diplomat, and he was down there, and they were really trying to broker this deal. And I could go on for hours about what's gone wrong with everything there, but suffice it to say that the Palestinians were promised so much, and then they were given nothing. What happened a year ago, unforgivable, but they're punishing the entire population. They've destroyed that place. There's nowhere for them to go back to. I'm not sure how it's going to end up.
Yeah.
I'm quite despondent about several places in the world now.
Yeah,
One of which
yeah,
is my own country.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's tough for people that have been there and interacted with people. You certainly get a different outlook than just what the newspapers say, of course. You've been to many places. I want to hear you tell the story. One of the times you came over to Cairo, and see how it gels with my memory, where Sir Cluggs and I picked you up, and it was a very special run in Cairo, the International Rehydration. The way I remember it, it is just one of the weirdest things that's ever happened on the planet. What do you remember?
Well, you wouldn't. I got a call saying that if we wanted to come down, we could join you for the international run. And for those who don't know, this is a run where they have lots of stops. That each stop is hosted by a different nationality. You have an American stop, a French stop, a German stop, an Egyptian stop, British stop. And at each of these stops, they do snacks and drinks typical of that country. Now, the Americans couldn't get their act together, so they had two. They had a Confederate stop and a Union stop. And the Union stop, they were giving out, what was it? Long Island iced teas. They had a chest of Long Island iced teas with a tap on the end. And the Southern stop, they were giving out Southern Comfort. But it was a good run. And when I was talking, it could have been Sir Cluggs or it might have been you. I said, do you mind if we bring down some drinks and flag and stuff from Israel? And somebody obviously wasn't thinking very clearly, because they said yes. So we brought down some Israeli flags and some cases of Israeli beer.
Maccabee, yeah.
And a couple of bottles of tequila. And we went out. I think Sir Cluggs arranged for us to have a stop. And we were out down in a wadi. Now, this was only a couple of miles from the pyramids, only a couple of miles from Cairo. And we had the Israeli flag flying in this wadi. And as people were running and coming down and seeing it, it caused a little bit of concern. I think we probably took it down, but maybe we didn't.
But here's what I remember. When we were setting it up, the drink stop and getting it all set up, and then we were going to go off so we could make the trail and eventually come there. I don't know if we left someone behind. We would occasionally encounter the Egyptian army. And the police, you can argue with and say get up, but you don't mess with the army. And we saw in the distance something we had never seen, a bunch of gun barrels, tanks or something in the distance poking up. And we had some binoculars. We're looking and say, they can't be looking at this flag and upset, but we better take it down. We took it down and the gun barrels disappeared. I don't know, cause and effect.
Looking back, it was an incredibly stupid thing to do. But 35 years ago, we were young and we were going to live forever, whatever happened.
Yeah, but they let us alone. They did not come and investigate. Yeah, they left us alone.
No, we had several cases of Maccabee beer that we dished out, and we were giving out shots of tequila to everybody and said, "This is the Israeli national drink." No, it isn't. Yes, it is. They've even got a song about it. Have tequila, have tequila, have. Yeah, it was good times. It was good times.
You have lots of skills. If people read what your name is here on the thing, it's going to say Wurlitzer Organ Rescue, and that's a new thing that you're taking, restoring an organ. But you're also a singer outside the hash at quite an experience level.
I did. I'm 72 now, and my voice has gone. But we went hashing in different countries. But at the same time, I also was in a lot of amateur dramatics. I played Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, Tony in West Side Story. Some quite good parts. And in Turkmenistan, where we were for 4 years, we did 2 tours back to back. There was a national youth orchestra So I invited some of them to come and play at our residence for a party I was having. And I got up and sang with them. And then they invited me to sing at one of their concerts. Now, this is an orchestra that's got 30, 40 members. They're really the most professional orchestra in Turkmenistan. So then they asked me back and they asked me back. And then after 1 year, after the first year, I was then a regular for the whole 3 years I was there. I got to sing a song on every single concert. And I didn't speak Russian or Turkmen. And there were a lot of little babushka women who didn't speak English and stuff, but I had my own little following there. And I just walk out on stage and I'd be treated like a rock star. But remember, this was Turkmenistan, a really closed country, a dictatorship. They really didn't have much to cheer for. So I'll take what I can get.
You have a commanding presence and you like to perform, run the circle, contribute as a GM or an RA, and contribute entertainment and singing, and you have a way with crowds. Now, how much of that did you have before you started hashing through your performance art? How does that go back and forth? Did you ever get anything out of hashing that enhanced your later other performances?
I think it was the other way around. I could start taking bottles of beer on stage, but they complemented each other. Because on the one side, I had to dress up in a dinner jacket and bow tie and perform and behave and go, thank you. And in the circle, you can just tell people to shut the fuck up and sing rude songs. I got to sing songs on the hash that I would never be able to sing in public. In fact, a lot of them you probably couldn't even sing on the hash now. I remember the swing low. When did that become an issue?
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. We should get Trump and MAGA to get the political correctness removed from the hash. That would,
Yeah.
You might be able to do something with that.
When I started this podcast 5 years ago, I thought I need something rap or dance. So members of Mother Hash had a choral recording of Swing Low, very austere sounding. And so I put it on the podcast, and occasionally I'll get somebody saying, oh my gosh, you got to take that off there. But it's interesting that Mother Hash, they are not a hash that sing songs or anything, but a lot of them hash other places and have some of the hash traditions. And to them, there's no issue. It's just in certain pockets where it has become a thing. It is crazy.
Yeah. There's one of the things I love about it is that people can be outrageous without really meaning it. You say crazy shit and you do crazy things just for a laugh, but you don't really mean it. That's not what your real core beliefs are. In fact, I don't even know what's wrong with Swing Low. Is it to do with the fact that it used to be a slave song?
I think that's that some people have problems with. I think so.
Look, just because slaves used to sing a song doesn't mean that nobody else can sing it. I don't really see anything wrong with the actual song.
Yeah.
The movements, the gestures we put to it are pretty disgraceful, and you wouldn't want to do that in public, but I don't know what's wrong with the words or the text or just singing it. That's, political correctness.
Like you said, often you don't always have control over all of your travel opportunities on different calendar dates. You're hashing locally and involved for 30 some years. What about other events that you travel to and away from home, wherever you were to travel to, other inter hashes and stuff?
I started my interhash experience in Cyprus, and then very quickly, because I wasn't actually working for the State Department the first few years. I was working as a family member, so I was a lot more free. I didn't have a career to worry about. I just could pick and choose. Then after that, I got hired on as a full-time direct hire State Department diplomat. Can you believe that? And so I didn't have the same freedom. But after Cyprus, I did Chiang Mai, which was unbelievable. The 10,000 lanterns floating into the sky at the end. From Chiang Mai, I was in Perth.
Right.
I did Perth. Then I went to Wales for the interhash down there. And that was interesting because I did some hashing in London the couple of weeks leading up to it. And they'd arranged a train, a real beat up old train from London down to Cardiff. And it was just for the hash. And these were carriages that were going to be taken out of service, apparently. And it just didn't go straight. It went the long way round. It pulled off into sidings. It stopped and let us get off and stretch our legs and stuff. There was a couple of cattle cars at the back. We threw our luggage in, and on every single seat, there was a case of beer and a plastic bag with 6 cheese rolls in it. So you had a rolling hash from London to Cardiff on a train. Now, that normally takes an hour and a half by a high-speed train. This took 7 hours. And when we arrived, the chaos on the platform with everybody, there had to have been 300-400 drunken hashes getting off this train, and there was this giant pile of luggage that everyone's trying to sort through. Chaos. But a wonderful event, and I loved the hash venue, Cardiff Arms Park. They divided the ground into 2 halves. One half was for drinking and partying, and there was a stage, and the other half was like a restaurant. You went there to eat, tables and chairs. And what divided it up were these beer tankers. They had beer tankers with these giant hoses on them. And these were coming out into machines that were filling 12 glasses at a time with one pour. And you just went up, grabbed 12 glasses and moved on. They were plastic glasses, obviously. Absolutely so well run. I'd like to do another one, but I'm not sure I would know so many people these days.
You went to all the surrounding events, like you said, the train trips, the thinking, drinking hashes.
Oh, I've done a few of those, yes.
I don't remember which one, sharing a circle with you. And I think that's the place. I often do my Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean in any kind of group, hash and non-hash. And I think I got it from you.
Yes, I can't do that now. My knees won't do it, but it's fun. Oh, another little sidebar, funny story. I used to do that with a partner. We were ping and pong, Chinese policemen in an English pantomime, right? And we did that for the children. My Barney, stand up, sit down, stand. Yeah. My Barney, like, we came out on the stage and there were 2 rows of kids in wheelchairs. Oh, shit, what are we going to do here now?
Oh my God.
So we had them waving their hands in the air and had to think on our feet. There was so much fun going on. The State Department has a training base in Thailand, in Bangkok. They have a new embassy, newish, it's probably 20 years old now, but the older embassy, the previous one, that's now used for training and other offices. So I spent a bit of time down there. So I got to go hashing in Bangkok a few times. There was a pre-Interhash run there, the red light district, the red light run, you know, where we all ran around Bangkok and ended up in the red light district, and they put a giant bar down the middle of Soy Cowboy, and it was unbelievably fun. Everybody was just going crazy. And then up to Chiang Mai for the hash. Another time I went to Thailand, talk about political correctness, it was the women's hash. They did still have a women-only hash, but to celebrate International Women's Day, they invited the men along. So it was quite a big hash. There was the International Women's Day. Men were joining. It was wonderful. Then there was a circle, and then the GM of the men's hash came and gave a present to the GM of the women's hash, and it was all wrapped up in Christmas paper, but you could see what it was. It was an ironing board. And that didn't go down well either.
Oh, that's great. All right, you're decked out there. You have a purse shirt. What about your hat and your happy coat there? What's some of the history of some of this stuff?
Happy coat is Tucson, so Sister Michael.
Sister.
And it's got a few patches on there.
There's Chiang Mai.
I've got something for you. When I was in Turkmenistan, we started the hash and we didn't have a logo or anything. So I'd been out and bought myself an embroidery machine, just a small singer that you could make patches one at a time. So I did a design of a patch, and then it was accepted, and we had several hundred made off in Hong Kong and came in. But I've got a couple of those, which I've got on other clothing. When I was sorting out some stuff, and I came up with my prototype, which was this.
Wow.
Which is, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, there's a hare with a beer on a camel. I'm going to have to stop talking so that the camera will focus back on the patch, but it's a hare holding a beer on a camel there, and it says Hash House Harriers. Oh my God. Ashrabat. Yeah. Wow.
Ashrabat, Turkmenistan. So I'll send this to you.
Put it back up and I'll stop talking. We'll make sure it's on the camera. Yeah. A little higher. Perfect.
I can send you a good.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty unique one because
Wow.
it didn't last many days after I left there. We had so much fun in Turkmenistan with the hash and traveling. In fact, I got sick in Germany once and I was in a hospital and I'm sitting out on the first floor on a balcony overlooking the car park and somebody cycles past and shouts up on, and I look down and it's the wolf because he lived in Germany, in Frankfurt.
Was he in Frankfurt? Yeah.
Frankfurt, yeah, he lived in Frankfurt. He smuggled me out of the hospital. We went to a bar, had a couple of beers, and he said, "Where are you now?" I said, "I'm in Turkmenistan." He asked me how long I was going to be there, and I said, "At least another year and a half." He says, "Do you mind if I bring one of my hash groups through there?" I didn't know this, but Wolf used to do an annual trip where a group of friends, maybe 40, 50 people, would do something really interesting. They did the Trans-Siberian Railway and some other stuff, and he wanted to do the Silk Road. So he asked me if I'd help arrange it, and I did. So he flew in with, I think it's like 45 hashes. Now, this was an expensive trip. So these were all established, mature hashes, mostly a lot of retirees. And they came and spent 3-4 days in Ashgabat, and we gave them a really good time. And then we put them on the train across the Karakum Desert up to the next country up. Very successful. Now, I've mentioned before that Turkmenistan was a real dictatorship, secret service everywhere. We couldn't get permission to do a run. We got permission to run if the security services could shadow us. They're all in shiny grey suits. You can see the bulges where their guns are and stuff. But I knew that I would never be allowed to go out and lay a trail. That would be instantly arrested for littering. So I sneakily went round in the 2 weeks leading up to it, taking photographs of points of interest around town. And then I put these all together and edited it. So I just gave everyone a list of these little pictograms and said, "You're there. And you've got to find that. When you get there, you'll be able to see that. When you get there, you'll be able to see that." So when the security services, I said, I promised to give them a map of where we were going. And I just gave it this with all these pictures on it. They had no clue what we were up to. We got back to the bar where we were having the on, and they came in all hot and sweaty like an hour and a half later. They had no clue how to follow it. That was fun. That's fun. Great.
Is there anything you can talk about where you would have gotten into trouble if you weren't with the credentials you have, or the hash didn't have somebody on it who they had? Are there any stories like apart from our desert in Cairo?
Marty, Garfield and I did a lot together in Ethiopia. He and I were laying a trail. So we drove out of town and we're laying the sawdust. And we got arrested by the police and taken to the police station. He doesn't have any ID on him. So he says, "I'm a diplomat. Show me your card." "I don't have it." "Then you are not." He got escorted back to his residence to pick up his passport. I had ID on me, so I was able to show that. And then I went out to finish the trail, and I knew that I would never be able to do the trail. So what we did was I just did it from pub to pub on the outskirts of Addis Ababa. Big mistake. All these children, thousands and thousands of children that started gathering around us. You had the 1890 hashes, and then there were at least 200-300 kids chasing us and screaming and so on. So we had to take shelter in a hotel, and we were told there was a bar on a rooftop bar. So we went up to the rooftop bar and we stayed there and had a few beers. And there's some of these visitors, hash visitors and expats who thought it would be fun because all the kids were outside singing and chanting to throw coins at them. When they start falling 4 floors down, they start hurting people. And then they're scrambling for the money. It got violent. We had to really try and calm it down. We couldn't get out of that hotel for several hours before we'd arranged like an escort. It's a cultural thing. We knew if we'd stopped to think, or if we'd even discussed it with anybody, we just went ahead and did it and then accepted the consequences. But that worked out okay in the end. There was one in Turkey, hashed in Turkey, where we were running through on the outskirts of Ankara, and it started raining so hard, and there was a farmer's shed. So we decided to cut the run short, go into this farmer's barn, and there was nobody there. There was a tractor and there was no animals, just some straw and stuff. So we moved some bales of straw into a circle, and so we could sit down, and it should never have touched his property. Do you know how expensive they are? Apparently, we'd bought them the moment we moved them. So he came in and he was going crazy, and he called the police, and we had to pay for the straw that we'd moved. So there would have been some arrests there if most of us weren't diplomats or with foreign missions of some kind. I don't think people can do that kind of thing now, because when you go to, even as we were leaving the State Department, everything now is, it's all optics. Don't do that. You mustn't. You shouldn't be on the hash. What people will say is very important. So the rules have changed. I don't think we could get away with a lot of what we used to get up to in the 90s.
Let's talk about that in terms of hash changing. So the external world changed, and that changed the impact and possibilities and guardrails on the hash. Social media, cameras everywhere, not people's cameras, but just cameras everywhere. If you had to guess 50 years from now, in the 90s, if people had to come from the 30s, they'd recognize the hash. We're still there in funny clothes, doing whatever, singing under the radar. What's the future?
There's a few ways of looking at this. Things always change, and we're supposed to adapt. But I think people who are coming into the hash now, even if they're 30, they've grown up with multimedia, with an online presence, cameras, with phones with cameras. But you tell them not to bring cameras on the hash, and they wouldn't come. They'd say, you can't tell me to do that. So recruitment is a big problem, I've heard. Now, I went to Europe for 3 weeks for Christmas. I did a tour of European Christmas markets, and I'd arranged to meet up with Higgins and go to the Brussels hash Christmas dinner, which was formal. So I had my DJ and bow tie and went with them, and they had this fantastic sit-down dinner, probably 40, 50 people, and amazing. The booze flowed, it was crazy, the singing and everything. But there was not one single camera. They have a rule in the Brussels hash, and it's being respected. And I think that is the way to go. I noticed, and they said they have a hash flash who goes around and takes the pictures, right? But they're only pictures. There's no video. There's no audio. And it just seemed to me to make a lot of sense to have a hash flash, because otherwise you're going to spend your life looking through the lens of a camera. You're going to miss so much of it. And it was so great to see Higgins again. I'm sure you've met him. He's cutting back. Yeah. He had some health issues as well.
Yeah, we were out this past summer for his birthday party week. So we got to spend a whole week with him, having events like that, mostly less formal, and walking around Brussels. And yeah, it was good catching up.
I think that was just before I went there. Yeah, it would have been. We went there for Christmas.
You were there this past Christmas?
Just a month ago.
Oh, that's great. Oh, wow. Yeah, we were there in August with a crowd. Oh, that's great. Nice.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the fact that people who have been started hashing 35, 45 years ago, we're not forever on this place. And we've lost people, as you mentioned, several people have gone on, the Wolf. And you've met everybody along. The Penguin just passed 50 years of hashing.
Wow.
The Scottish guy.
Cheese.
Yeah, mellow foreskin cheese is done. Penguin's still okay, but mellow foreskin cheese, yeah, people pass on.
Another we have. Was it Spinal Tap?
Spinal Tap and Hasher Humper, his wife died in a diving accident a few years before he died. Yeah, so both of them are gone. So yeah, a lot of figureheads, people that the nature of the hash, you see someone, you haven't seen them for 5-6 years, but you feel like they're still best friends. And yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that was mostly because it was people from an expat community. It's different if you travel to Australia for 10 days to go to the Interhash, you're going to meet some people. But you're not going to make the same connections as if you're 2 years at a posting with the same people, and you're all looking for something to fill the downtime with because you're away from home. So you can spend 2 years where you can go hashing and really enjoy yourself, and you're not ignoring your family and other friends. They're not even in the same country, and you become very close indeed.
One thing I wanted to ask you personally, and the question, I hope it's not offensive. I'm trying to understand. You are a performer, an artist, a talented guy in a lot of different ways on the stage, in the key roles. It's something that you need to have control of your ego to be successful and not be arrogant. And then performing in the hash, it is for some people their only stage. And so some people who are an RA don't have any other outlet. So it's very important to them. And I got to admit, sometimes for me, I want to come in and make sure everything goes and step in. You have a great way of involving yourself in whatever's going on and not doing it in a way that seems to be, you deserve a spot here, you contribute. And you're a funny and a big singing guy and you participate. How do you like it when you're not in the circle? If you were in the circle, when you were in the days of being around the outside, how did you handle those?
I used to sing along a lot. I have a hash group. If I was in a place for more than 2 or 3 weeks, the singers would congregate, and they'd congregate around me. We'd have a hash songs, and I would actually give them a note so we could start off at the right note, because so many people think they can sing, and maybe they can, but they start out singing so high that they can never finish the song. So I think a music meister needs to know a little bit about music. Don't start singing a song unless you know all the words. Otherwise, people go, I know that song, and then they say, yeah, I don't know what the rest of it is, and walk off. That's not very entertaining at all, is it? That's just letting everyone down. It is a performance of sorts. I thoroughly enjoy it. I like making a fool of myself, and that's what it comes down to. So the ego, I don't think there has to be an ego. You have to be very self-deprecating, almost.
Quite different. It's very different than leading a theater troupe or a choral group on stage.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Darling, come and say hi to Matthew.
Yeah.
And on the way, pick me up a little something from the fridge. By the way, they're not twist-offs. So I've got to get a...
Oh, you carry that off anyhow. Yeah.
You remember Maria?
Yeah.
She was born in...
It's been a while since I've actually seen her, I think.
Yeah, we stayed with Sir Clugs. We went down there, and I forget what we were doing, but we stayed with Sir Clugs. And at the time, he had a girlfriend from West Africa.
Yeah.
Enough said, I'm guessing.
Hello, Matthew.
Hi, hold on. How are you?
Good to see you.
Look what you're wearing. That's great.
Coincidental, I promise you.
No.
We've got so many hash shirts, t-shirts now, that we actually use them around the house. I had to cut up a few recently. They weren't very interesting ones to use for polishing my organ.
So they say.
Am I allowed to say that on radio?
Yeah.
Thank you, darling. Appreciate it.
Oh,
But I've actually sorted them all out. I had hundreds, and I've got probably 80 good ones, all at least 15 years old from the old days. And I've got those all squeezed down and packed up, ready to send off. I was going to send them to Europe, but I understand it's now all down in KL.
Yeah, the permanent homes there, they're actually going to start a formal fundraising platform to allow hashers to fund it. At the very beginning, I really had almost nothing to do with it, but chatting with Neptunus when he was self-funding, I said, I'm going to send you some money. put something on the wall with our hash names on it and tell people they can buy more plaques and quit paying for this yourself. And now he's got a team and they're polling people and they're going to have funding. So it will likely last forever there.
Now, do we own the property, the land?
The land is under the control of some organization that the Hash Heritage Foundation. It's separate from Mother Hash. It's separate from everything, but it is an entity that has overlapping people called the Hash Heritage Foundation. A legal entity owns the land. That part seems to have gone over the hump, made it through the dark days and what happened to the money and what happened to paying the tax, and it seems to be pretty solid.
Yeah. I didn't know there'd been a problem with missing money.
I think they just took dollars from so many people and didn't know what to do with it. And there was some unfortunate timing in elections, and they lost promises from government and then had to do some things and just said it wasn't that someone stole the money, it just glittered away with no progress to pay taxes. And
Oh, okay. I know there was an issue down in South America that kind of got a lot of attention a couple of years ago, but
yeah, Sir Clugs will hear this and maybe he can give you a call and catch you up on the life pattern that happened. Yeah, he had some bumps, but he's happily now married to a Filipina and has a family and splends he's still going, I think, between Ghana, Philippines, and the UK, Milton Keynes, and
Milton
triangulating.
Keynes, concrete cows. Yeah, I tell Maria that my next wife is going to be either Thai or Filipino.
And so what about retirement? When did you guys actually stop this world assignment posting? And did you spend time posted in the US?
Yes, but not much. After Turkmenistan, we went to Eritrea for 2 years. From there, we had difficulty finding a place overseas where we could both be together. So we went back to DC for 2 years. While we were there, I was in what's called OBO, Office of Buildings Operations, and I was designing the computer networks and so on for the new embassy in Oslo, which is where my kids, right? It's who you know. And Maria was the PA of the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, which includes Norway. So she knew all the players. I knew all the people at the embassy because they were building a new embassy. So I was in touch with the guy who would be my boss if I got the job there. And I schmoozed with him and he recommended me. Maria was recommended for Oslo. So our final tour, we actually get posted to Norway, where my children are, to Oslo with all my old friends in the Hash. It could not have ended better.
Yeah.
And then because we had PS clearances and so on, you were subject to random testing for drugs and so on. Nothing wrong with alcohol at the time, although they're tightening up on that. The thing was, if you got caught, you could ruin your career. So you just didn't do it. Maria retired on her 50th birthday. I still had another year to go in Oslo. So she retired on a Friday evening. On Saturday morning, we flew down to Amsterdam for a month. We just got an Airbnb and we just
caught up on let everything catch back out.
Yeah, what are they going to do now? Fire me? No. Yeah, they probably could fire me by taking away my pension. Yeah. Let's not talk about that. Don't give him any more ideas, Michael.
Yeah. One thing, just as a sideline, the vicar is GM of the next Interscandy.
Interscandy, it's the one that's going on this summer. It's in Tallinn, isn't it?
No, that's Eurohash.
Oh, that's Eurohash.
They did Interscandy 2 times ago. Then it went to Hamburg, and the vicar took it. It was in Hamburg last summer, and it's going to be in Oslo.
Oslo,
Norway.
Yeah, when? This year or next year?
No, it'll be 2 years from this past summer.
It'll be
27.
27.
26. It must be 27. Oh, they had this. Do we have it every year? Do we have it every 2 years? Do what you want. I think he's having it. Can't be this year because that's Eurohash. It must be 26. I think it's next year.
Yeah, I think people who were saying you should do this thing every year obviously have absolutely no fucking idea of the work, the research, the planning that goes into it, the arm twisting. It's amazing that people think you could do that every year. That's crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Why don't they do the Olympics every year? Because of that.
Yeah. Let's talk about Wurlitzer organ rescue and what you've gotten up to post hashing there in Arizona.
When I was in Uganda, I got hold of some plans for building a Wurlitzer organ. I'd been thinking about it for a while. The hash wasn't very exciting in Uganda. It was a running club, really. Very good, very fast runners. But so I started building an organ, and my buddy says to me, "Have you ever done any carpentry?" I said, "No." He said, "Most people start with a bookshelf, not an organ." This is that thing over there. That's my replica that I built. Took me 20 years. This thing behind me over here is actually an original 100-year-old organ. Now, the way I got that was I was trying to get some parts for my replica, and somebody sent me some in a container, and it was an entire original 100-year-old Wurlitzer carousel organ in pieces, damaged by water and fire. And that's what I'm putting back together. So I started a YouTube channel to document it called Wurlitzer Organ Rescue. So hashers, support a retired hasher. Just check out Wurlitzer Organ Rescue.
What about the organ renovation community? We've got the hash, which people will talk about. You've got friends around the world from it. People don't know, say, is it a cult? Is there something in the organ community like that? Is there a bunch of characters you meet?
Yes, there's the Carousel Organ Association of America. There's the Fairground Organ Association of America. There's the Carousel Builders. There's so much. And the internet, mind you, I have to say that many people are in multiple groups, but they do get together 2 or 3 times a year. They have these organ rallies. In fact, there's one coming up in Pennsylvania, May the 3rd. I don't think I'll have this ready, but what I want to do is get these ready, bung them on a trailer, and take them to these organ rallies. So that's going to be my next social circle.
You're going to teach them any songs?
Well, I'm still trying to find someone who plays the piano so I can do my little one-man comedy show. But it's difficult. Nobody believes me. Nobody believes me when I tell them I was a ballet dancer.
Opera singer, yeah.
I was in the Royal Navy as well. Got my ship's crests up there.
Yeah,
Only for a couple of years, they put me on a minesweeper, and I got so seasick.
It's quite a life, and I think that this has been fun, just telling stories and seeing what comes out across, rather than trying to go through a chronology. Just the stories that happen to pop up in this discussion are great. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people will realize that they've hashed with you. When was the last time you were hashing?
Oh, I hashed this last summer in Oslo.
Oh yeah. Okay, great.
I met up with a load of people. I'm trying to think, when we retired, that kind of meant that we didn't really have a home hash anymore. And Tucson's a little bit too far away to do that on a regular basis. Yeah. Now this has been fun.
Yeah. If there's anybody else that you just say, yeah, you mentioned some of the people, and certainly starting PanAfrica with Garfield. It's a historic thing for hashers. The number of people who have been to a PanAfrica who didn't know, here's one of the guys. He's the guy that came up with the idea of saying, let's have a little party for the Ethiopians. And turned into that.
You make it sound quite grand, when in fact we thought it was going to be a one-off. We only called it that so that we could invite people from other African hashes, and we actually got a few people came from America, so we were very surprised. Back in those days, people were scanning the international event lists for somewhere interesting to go to. They wouldn't go necessarily to hash, but if they can go to hash in Ethiopia, that then becomes special.
Yeah. Good luck with the organ. When do you think you're going to be able to finish that up? When will the YouTube series say this is the
Well-
last episode on this item?
You have to look at them. There's 20 videos up, and they vary in length between 10 and 15 minutes. And that's all the work that I've done up to now. It depends if I can be bothered to get out of bed and set my tools up. I've got them all on wheels at the side of the garage. So if I'm going to do something, I have to move the car, set up the workshop, and at the other end of the day, I have to clear it all up. The reason it's taken me 20 years to do this thing is that I could only ever do it on weekends. So I'd get up early and I'd go out on a Saturday morning and start working on my organ. And then a friend would come round and the beer would come out. And you know what? Power tools and beer don't mix. So I got most 2.5 hours work done a week.
That's great.
But
Well, I just think a lot of people are going to be happy that we tracked you down. And I know I've been bugging you for a long time to do this. And I know you're a big personality and really humble about PanAfrica. It's a great contribution. And anytime you're at the hash, you always put your back into it and made it fun for everybody. So I appreciate all that.
But I also started a hash in Bulgaria. Who did I-
Sophia, did you
In
restart
Sofia.
Sophia?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Back in, this would have been before 2019 or then. It had been going, but we started up. So I got a logo and we did some T-shirts and started advertising around the embassies again. And it worked quite
MTN
well.
was there? Was MTN there then?
MTM, yes. So she and I basically got that resurrected. And then I resurrected the Turkmenistan hash. That didn't last long. Yeah, I've got way more out of hashing than I've put in, though, to be honest. I still probably owe money for a lot of beer around the world.
Yeah, it's funny. The one thing where I met you, it's interesting. Cypress hashing is doing pretty good. There's multiple hashes around there, but never again. A lot of these places, Bali, of course, has hosted the Interhash a couple times and they go back. And that's true with Africa. The world changing means there's not as many places can have big events. So I just think it's impressive that it survived. We have started a South America, South America hash. It just had one event, and we'll see if it survives. It's a major undertaking. Yeah.
Another one of my big connections on the hash is he wears a fishing hat with silly.
Yeah.
He's American, ex-army, retired, travels around the world hashing, basically.
The Marine, Hazukashi.
Hazukashi, of course. Okay, I'd been hearing about him for many years before Chiang Mai, and he'd heard about me, about singing and stuff, and he loves to sing. And then I'm actually on a plane from, I think it was Frankfurt to Bangkok. I'm sitting next to him and we get talking and he's talking about the hash. I do a lot of singing with the hash. He says, so do I. I said, what's your hash name? What's your hash name? I said, Kashi, you are fucking kidding me. So we had the whole flight to chat with each other. I saw him most recently on one of the pirate cruises. Done about 5 of those since we retired. It's the hash out of Florida. They go on cruises. You have to dress like a pirate for the whole cruise, and it's very silly, but it's a lot of fun. So I've done a lot of those.
I said, I think the hashing world is 2 degrees of freedom separation for maybe for everybody on the planet. And most people said if Hazukashi, it's 2. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right.
I've got one of me. Do you remember Perth? There
Yeah.
were those girls that went round dressed. Foster's, I've got me. They're like doing a line, a chorus line thing. That's a fun picture. I'll send you a couple and you can choose.
Yeah. I know you're busy deciding whether it's a power tool or a beer, but in between, we'll stay in touch and I'll keep you caught up on what's going on with the Hash Museum. We're going to Antarctica tomorrow. We're going on a hash arranged cruise ship where 3/4 of the people are hashers, so we're going to be out for a while. I might not get this published till March. I'm not sure if I can edit on the boat.
I'm not in any hurry. what you said. I know what happened. Okay. Cheers.
All right.
Good talking to you.
Cheers. On.
This is the On podcast. Hash your stories, hash your voices, hash your history. New episodes every week. Until next time, On. This is Ra. To close the circle, here's the Hash anthem sung by Mother Hash.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to